working your way around. And the Proterozoic era, again, these are kind of the big cliff notes. Is the Ottoman Empire, one of the biggest empires that ever existed on the planet. That's the 99%, which we'll find out later here, in terms of where humanity has been. When you look at the shelf and say, hey, wow, as far as monkey been around and people calling it what it is, that's a hell of a turn. It'll take you back to the sponge. And of course the electroweak epoch in line with the Big Bang, right? We want to keep that nature of this element is what kind of makes it. It's hot fusion here. We could take the timelines, just do the readouts for the class on that day, really describe what kind of timelines we need to do for it, and different models of that to make sure that when we're looking at the Ottoman Empire in terms of its totality, what it was at its zenith or where it is today, against what it was at a point in time of
We
its
have
evolution,
crayons.
its
We'll figure
expansion
it
out
out.
into that full state of that regional model over there next to Italy or the Red Sea and things like that. And that's something you'll find today. And culturally, those things will still be here today by those weak forces, weakly attracted and system models. And also the evolution of Lucy here and where that archaeology puts things in a timeline, which is gravity calc, that has to do with a lot of the time scales of this thing shifting around from the Proterozoic era. Where was it from the beginning to roughly the end of the Proterozoic era, and that's a lot of shape differentials. That's this thing creeping around on you on massive time scales to what happens in the CMB. Right now, we're having a conversation about timelines that jump around and day-night cycles that really make something big and different later, as far as the optics on the plasma in itself, because right now it's still E0. It's solid, but it's a liquid gas at the same time inside of X and Y as far as ideal gases and their molecule size to under pressure at a spot. It was going to give you a rough area of the timeline of how long that'll still be ice, or there will be an amount of ice that is no longer ice. So just density differences, derivatives, and things like that. And those are going to be your photons. Other people doing it like that, it track to the FMA, those types of calc graph to it, so your projectile momentums, your center of mass, the arbitrary angle, service timelines. And those are going to get you into the quirky things that come across that type of structure, chessboard, or a battleship field to what is a neutralino out there, something that's kind of working like a gas, it's plasma, some anti-mean 3355 math problem of the Battle of Lepanto, over there with the Catholics in the Ottoman Empire, one of the biggest defeats that pretty much imploded the system of somebody got off the farm one way or the other, can't really tell from what the write out here is. You'll see it in the world that the Ottomans maybe got a little frisky with the island over there, and which island was it here? The Venetian colony, and over by Cyprus, and it made an issue. So 1570, it helps you with those names. Okay, so back to an error under humanity was inside this time frame was the Paleolithic. We're really starting to get into the more recent areas. I think the atlatl, things that are decayable, the tents and teepees and stuff, which you'll still see housing sites, you'll still see arrowheads and bones, graveyards and stuff like that correlate to a time frame when that stuff was around, by virtue of some of the arrowheads on the surface decayed and went into the ground, where even if you buried somebody deeper than that, it would make cosmological sense that that's kind of something different than just some critter lined up out there. Matabrachiosaurus buried in the archaeology here, the Smithsonian's with bones. Okay, so then you got the Proterozoic era again, but more of its life topological models, not just here where the broad strokes of what it is, oxygen rich in terms of the planet, but also now the cellular life that starts to get into that evolution of Lucy and the Paleolithic time frames. And again, remember, I did this in a very specific way. Individually, you would want to say chronological to the timeline, but remember, where you would start would be the Ottoman Empire, not necessarily the Big Bang. And there are different subvariables of which type of relative axiom that you're coming at that from. So The Protozoic life here is the first trace of life 2.5 billion years ago, and you'll break that down into when the red-green slime algae comes in because it's a little bit predatory. We'll get into red-blue uh, population predator prey algorithms in terms of mining and stuff because those things start to chew on each other. You find that there's a massive collapse in some of the cultures and organisms that lived at that point in time because of some of these massive shifts on wave functions that correlate to this Malvolitian cycle, which is like a Bell's inequality, which is like a Minkowski space. We know this form could be used to it, but its time scales, FMA, may be vastly different to which ball we're throwing, what compositions make it up, and why it's got the spin it's got. Or Universe Sandbox, Jupiter in the wrong position. So English class here, we'll do English class A. Again, this is not just for what it is. This is more of a master's handler on this. We'll make this more comprehensive. But let's begin with the subject matter of Velveteen Rabbit. There was once a Velveteen Rabbit. He was a fat and bunchy, and his coat was spotted brown and white. And his ears were lined with pink satin. On Christmas morning, when he sat wedged in the top of his boy's stocking, with a spring of holly between his paws, the effect was charming. And so we're going to begin to do this brick and dryer technique, some of the heavier maths and the FMAs that actually say to a teacher what class you're dealing with, to a more advanced model of that class, and we're capitalizing on the calculus of engagement and physically moving some of that baryonic matter around using English. So class B here is going to be the glossary of physics, and I have this AB Inito, which is a mathematical standard for Schrodinger's equation that I got off the internet, and then I skipped the rest of the letters because I only had so much subject space without massing her out for the other technique that I'm doing here, which may be homework assignment relative, is background radiation and calculus. A, B's, and C's, English out there for the glossary. And we line that up again with thesis B. So we have first the write out, English class, then we have the glossary. And those are two different models. But what about two different books in thesis A and B here for To Kill a Mockingbird? When he was nearly 13, my brother Jim got his arm broke badly at the elbow. When it healed, and Jim's fears of never being able to play football were assured, he was seldom self-conscious about his injury. His left arm was somewhat shorter than the right, and we'll get into that analyticals, right? You know, here's that story base that's not Velveteen Rabbit, maybe meant for an older crowd or where that subject matter comes into thesis A and B, but we're still using English in situations whereas English might come in. And in something like Velveteen Rabbit, for the kids, it's meant to do that, whereas an adult, you may become real one day. And he said you become it. We'll get into that here in a minute. As far as that go, actually, we went to the glossary, or the illustrated glossary of chemistry. Well, that's more like the physics glossary, but now we're actually implying some written techniques that increase the efficiency of this and are very analytical. Also, a type of English with a different subset tells the story of this physical action, but different. And that's something that all kids are going to be able to great writers, and you want to make sure that you capitalize on that, or even be able to understand that material to write it well. Back book excerpts and quatrains. Velveteen Rabbit. Doesn't happen all at once, said the Skin Horse. You become. It takes a long time. That's why it doesn't happen to people who break easily, or have sharp edges, or have to be kept carefully kept. Okay, and I followed that up with Alex Carrel. Man cannot remake themselves without suffering, for he is both the marble and the sculpture. And once more into the breach, my dear friend, speech analysis. Now, which class are we dealing with? Just kids standing up there and talking with it? We could always change out the subject matter to something a little easier than calculus in radiation background for these A and B, or that molecule, the alpha beta unsaturated form of what it is a molecule, very pure system, basically one of the starter models, single stage relay. All right. So once more into the breach, dear friends. Once more. Or close the walls up with our English dead. In place, there's nothing so becoming in man as modest stillness and humility. But when the blast of war blow in our ears, the then imitate the action of the trigger, stiffen the sinew, summon up the blood, diagnose fear, nature with hard fury rage. And obviously there's some work that I need to do. This is my first round of my Penn's Row 45-minute class where I'm trying to take a minute for each sit up here or even faster. To the SCP Foundation write out. And again, that's just a write out inside here of which SCPs. Awaiting declassification 001. We'll skip that one for now as far as classes. But what about the living room right here? What's living here in this room? I mean, if we want to emphasize the living portions on that as a writing thesis for something like this, or biological motherboard. Can you use these subject matters not just in the way it is, but to design some story? Because these are amazing writings and readings. They take stuff that's more of a Valentine Rabbit level and give it that analytical system of something like To Kill a Mockingbird. And you're going to run this down there through the zombie plague, red ice. These are things as a teacher, I'll give you some hints, but that doesn't mean it's not wide open to be the anti-meme 3355 that it is, where you're describing the write-out of what those values were. What is an after-action report? And again, after you saw something in this world, you take it, it's right here. So you want to be able to make sure that you hit the main components of this: the incident overview, XYZ, what, when, where, the analyzation, which is again what, when, and where, but as what was observed, a better detailed model of what it is, a little bit more, and figure out the subject templates out for that, because again, it'll help you write a better Dick Tracy and a crime mystery system inside here as far as the basic article report, and you put that in one of the books with it, and give them something to gauge onto that's both useful for the story narrative, but potentially something in life as well, and help you engage in that subject matter to what an article may, in a key phase, need to look like. Now, again, this will change. You don't need to be so carefully kept in this material that ADP Army Publishing documentation, or Army Publishing Directorate. So this is a different type of English, right? You want to be able to understand that form of it. And again, back to your crime mystery here about NCIS or what may be. When we get into farther models of what this is, I'm not quite sure what it's going to be yet, but we'll get into the actual math and physics of that here soon to help you do some things, and I'll probably be sprinkling in some of that artsy bits with it to really help bump it up a little bit, and it's something that I hope. Catch you on the next one.